Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams. Welcome in to DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by DeemerBox, a brand new product we're going to be telling you a lot about over the weeks ahead here on our program. As you can see, obviously right now, everyone's watching on video. We haven't started the podcast radio show yet. A really cool kind of tailgate apparatus. This is like a Pelican carrying case. It's waterproof. It's got a Bluetooth speakers, the range up to 100 feet, 40 hours of battery life. You know, if you're doing the tailgate thing on Saturdays, you want something like this to help keep your guests entertained around the tailgate with the music. And for those of you who, like me, have a bunch of knucklehead friends, you can lock your phone and stuff like that up in there. So when people start spilling stuff, or maybe when people, whatever your situation is, you can just take good care of all your stuff with the DeemerBox. We'll be telling you more about that over the course of our program. We'll also have Jeff Sintel coming up. We will talk to him about a lot of stuff involving UGA recruiting, how the first week of the college football season impacts the race to close out strong with the 2020 class. We'll hear from Georgia coaches, Georgia players, and a whole lot more in between. Just really glad to have you with us as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by DeemerBox, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I have a brief confession off the top of the program. Some of y'all probably know this if you've watched closely enough over the years, or if you've listened closely enough over the years. I get really easily distracted. I'm sort of like I don't know that I have like officially sanctioned ADHD. I don't even know. I wouldn't begin to know if that's true or not, but sometimes it feels like I do. So anytime there's a lot of stimulation going on in a room, a lot of noises, a lot of distractions, a lot of flashing lights, it's going to be really hard for me to focus in on the task at hand. An example of that was Saturday night in the post-game press conference for Kirby Smart. First of all, the room in which we do DawgNation Daily, presented by DeemerBox, which we are doing today, is far larger than the room this post-game press conference is taking place in. You got Kirby Smart sitting there. You got like 1,000 media people crammed into what is essentially not much bigger than a closet. And there's so many people in there that the door is open. And so you got all this noise in the background. You got people running, to and fro. You got, carts and buzzers and beepers. For someone like me that gets distracted very easily, this was quite distracting. So a lot of the stuff from Kirby Smart's press conference on Saturday, I kind of missed the first time around because I could barely even hear what he was saying. So I was going back yesterday and I was rewatching some of this. And there was one thing that Kirby said on Saturday, and he kind of followed up a little bit with this again yesterday, and we'll get to that coming up in a moment. But there's one thing in particular that Kirby Smart said where when I heard it, I was like, wow, that's it. That is a whole calendar year's worth of episodes of our program, and every single place and time that dog fans get together and talk about their expectations for the upcoming season, it kind of all boils down to what Kirby Smart said here in just these couple sentences, these few seconds of speak. He was asked, hey, what did you learn about your team based on your opportunity to watch them for their first game here? And Kirby, in the midst of talking about what he learned or what he thinks he might have learned, he uses two, I think, very important words. And in some form or fashion, we have been talking about these two words for going on 9 months now. Ever since the disappointment of the SEC championship, it has been these two words that have been at the center of everything we have been discussing, and it was very interesting to hear Kirby Smart give voice to that as well. He's asked, what'd you learn about your team? This is what Kirby said.
We have a chance to be explosive offensively, and we're going to try to be aggressive defensively. I mean, I really feel like the backs I kind of knew about. The wideouts got some chances to make some plays, a couple balls. George there, I think he even caught one of those if he got an opportunity. It was just out of range for him. A couple of the other guys made good catches and made plays. So I feel good about that. But it's not like I agree with you that it's going to be blown out of proportion, either really positive or they struggle in the second half. But that doesn't matter to us. All we're doing is we're going back to work Monday, and we're going to go out there and go good on good, and we're going to put the hammer down and find out who's going to get better.
So first of all, I told you it was like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus during this post-game press conference. So I hope you heard what Kirby said there. He said he learned that they have a chance to be, his word, explosive on offense, and they're going to try to be aggressive on defense. In the midst of that conversation, he alludes to the fact that people like me, and maybe in some cases people like you, are going to overrate the good, overrate the negative. We know that's true to a certain extent. But when it comes to the ultimate prize that Georgia's trying to reach this season, I don't think you can overstate the importance of those two ideas, those two words. Explosive, that's the word for offense. Aggressive, that's the word for defense. I don't think you can overstate, nor do I think it'll be overrated, just how important that's going to be for Georgia here this year. And what were the results when it comes to Saturday? Good, probably not great. I said yesterday I don't think that a Georgia fan has too much of a leg to stand on if he or she wants to complain about what happened on Saturday. It was an easy Georgia win. But if you want to foreshadow what needs to happen the rest of the year, you need more explosiveness. You need more aggressiveness from your defense. To start with the offense here just for a moment, probably was not a great day from Jake Fromm. The stat we pay the closest attention to around here is yards per attempt. Realize that Fromm was like 6.8 yards per attempt on the day on Saturday. Frankly, that's not very good for an average SEC quarterback, and it's nowhere near the standard that Jake Fromm needs to set for himself, which is essentially a combination of how accurate you are versus how deep your throws are going downfield. 6.8 is not good enough for a quarterback that's been 9 and above for his 2 years as a starter up to this point. Now, of course, after the game, Smart offered a bit of a defense that carried on into Monday that for people like me who want to fixate on the stats and the fact that for Fromm on Saturday, they weren't that great, what Kirby would say is you sometimes have to look a little bit deeper to see what's truly going on. Here is Kirby from yesterday.
He makes a lot of decisions that people don't understand. I don't think anybody in the room would understand what he's doing when he's doing some of the mechanics, and some of it's pass, some of it's run, some of it's nothing, and some of it's window dressing. But he does that so that we can be successful, so that people don't get a beat on what we're doing, and it's not easy to do. Some of the rules he's got is complicated, and I don't need to get into it right now with you guys. It'd take me another 30 minutes to explain what he's doing on half the stuff, but he does a nice job of making sure that we're in successful plays. And as a defensive coordinator, I can tell you, because I go against him every day, it's frustrating because it's hard to be right a lot of times.
So I agree with Kirby Smart there on the two big points that he brings up. There is no doubt in my mind that Fromm is doing a whole lot more behind the scenes than sometimes we talk about in terms of his ability to read a defense and his ability to alter the Georgia offensive play or the offensive plan based on what he's seeing from a defense. I also agree with Kirby Smart that my mind is probably just not capable of comprehending just how much is going on the action within the play when it comes to college football. I think that Smart's probably right on both those accords. However, here's the one thing I'm pretty sure I'm right about. You are not going to check down your way to a national champion. You're not. It's going to be about ultimately, no matter how cerebral the quarterback play is, no matter how detailed the game plan is, ultimately Georgia's path towards a national championship is going to come down to this. Do you make the big throws or not? Now, I do think for Georgia this season, it's going to get easier to make these big throws as the relatively inexperienced crop of wide receivers gets a little bit more seasoned, and we know from the past that Fromm has made a lot of big throws in his Georgia career. But this is an element where even though football's complicated and even though Fromm's job is difficult, the evaluation is simple. Does Georgia make enough big offensive plays to be as explosive as, go back to use the word that Kirby Smart described, does Georgia do enough to be explosive enough to win the national championship? On the offensive side of the ball, that's what it's going to come down to. And while Georgia won easily on Saturday, it was not, at the national championship level anyway, explosive enough. Same thing for defense. It certainly looked like Georgia was very close to getting in on a lot of sacks. Ultimately, though, it ends up just being the one total sack with Ojulari and Tyndall kind of meeting at the quarterback there, goes down as two sacks for the team, but it's a half sack for each guy. But the Dogs were close. They were close a few times. Ojulari in particular seemed to be busting through with a chance there a couple of times. So quarterback pressure is probably pretty good. The overall tangible sacks that result in negative plays, maybe not quite as aggressive as you wanted to be. Here was the evaluation that Kirby Smart offered of that when he spoke to reporters on Monday.
Good in some cases and poor in some, which is usually the case every game. You wish you could do more. We had some good four-man rushes that we got him out of the pocket and didn't contain him, and we had some that we did better than others. So it's usually the case when you play teams in the SEC. They've got a plan to get the ball out quickly. You got to have a plan to counteract that, and you got to mix and mingle how much you rush more than four. And you got to be able to rush 3 and drop 8. You really got to be multiple and be able to do it, especially this week with a Murray State team that's able to get the ball out quickly.
I mean, listen, there's no doubt to me that Georgia is attempting to be more aggressive with his defense this year. Watching the game closely on Saturday, I think kind of proves that point. But what we don't yet know is if those aggressive tactics, whether it just be, sometimes blitzing or other times just really encouraging guys to win their one-on-one battle, if that's going to yield the kind of results that Georgia needs. I mean, in other words, to kind of wrap up this portion of the discussion, we learned on Saturday night that 2019 is going to be at least as good as 2017 and 2018 have been, in that Georgia is plenty good enough to win most of its games in easy fashion. On the road against an SEC foe, Georgia didn't sweat this thing for 2 seconds. We still don't yet know if this team is national championship good yet. But, as Kirby said, the explosive plays on offense, the aggressive plays on defense, for the good or for the bad, will determine for Georgia how this season ends. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by DeemerBox. We're available live on video 10 a.m. on our DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter feeds, radio at noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Good to be back on the Classic City today after a little holiday break yesterday. And, of course, anywhere you find podcasts, you can find DawgNation Daily presented by DeemerBox. And speaking of DeemerBox, if you're watching on video, you can see this for yourself. What a really cool tailgate piece this is. It's sort of the ultimate must-have piece for those of you who want to have the best possible tailgates that you can have. For those of you listening radio and podcast, let me describe this to you just for a moment. I'm also going to give you a website you can go to learn more about this yourself. DeemerBox.com. Now, that's spelled DEMER. DeemerBox.com/DawgNation. You can find out more about this. This is like a Pelican carrying case, completely waterproof. It's got Bluetooth speakers in the front. Now, the Bluetooth in this works from like 100 feet away. It's also got 40 hours of battery life. And so for those of you that want to take good care of your stuff, when it's, drinks are getting spilled or when it's raining or just anything like that, you can put your stuff inside this box. And the box also kind of works as a really nice speaker. So for those of you that have big-time tailgate experiences, I'd also say that this has a lot of applications to, we got hunting season coming up. A lot of you like to be at the lakes there as well. This kind of works for all of that. DeemerBox.com, DEMER, DeemerBox.com/DawgNation. You can find out more about this. It's hand-built right here in the USA. This is a very substantial product, the kind of thing that feels good in your hands and is going to look good at your tailgate. Take good care of your stuff and entertain your guests with a DeemerBox. It's DeemerBox.com/DawgNation to find out more information about that. I'm going to tell you about DawgNation Express some more in a minute. Can I hold off on that? Let me bring Jeff on in a minute. We'll talk some more about DawgNation Express because I want to make sure we get in some more stuff that I wanted to talk about too. We sold a bunch of DawgNation Express tickets yesterday, though, so y'all better be ready to act fast about that. But let me hold off on doing a bunch of DawgNation Express talk right now because I want to talk about something else instead before we bring Jeff Sintel on the program, and that is the fact that we did not probably see as much of linebacker Nakobe Dean on Saturday as we wanted to. I told the audience during our R.S. Andrews cool-down, in fact, on video yesterday, that I didn't remember seeing him in the game at all. Apparently he played a little bit. Maybe that was the early portion of the game. He's obviously been dealing with an injury. We've covered that now in pretty full measure here around DawgNation probably. And when Kirby spoke to reporters yesterday, he was asked about, hey, had Dean been healthier? Would he have played a lot more? And how would that have impacted maybe somebody else we saw, like a Quay Walker, who was in the game a lot? I thought Kirby gave a pretty interesting answer on that topic, given the fact that Dean is a guy that fans want to see this year, and the guy who ended up playing a good bit, Walker, is also a bit of a fan curiosity as well. This is pretty interesting from Kirby. Take a listen to this.
And Kobe's hurting still. I mean, we didn't think we thought he was close to being able to go in the game, and it was still bothering Kobe. He's not 100% yet. He was tough enough to go out there and try to go on it, but didn't feel like he could go 100%. So we held him out after that, and Quay got quite a few snaps, and he's continuing to grow. Quay keeps getting better.
It's that last part to me that's really interesting because, listen, I think we've all grown to believe, based on the way that spring practice unfolded, that Nakobe Dean, when he is 100% healthy, is going to be a big part of this Georgia defense. He's going to be a player too cerebral, too athletic to keep off the field. He has the look and the feel of a future elite inside linebacker at the SEC level. Dean's going to have a spot, going to have a role. I would have loved to have seen more of that from him this past Saturday. But in his absence, seeing as much as we did from Quay Walker, I took to be pretty exciting. And what it reminded me of was something that Georgia safety J.R. Reed told us back in July. And when he said this, I didn't quite know how to process it. But given what Reed said then and what Kirby Smart said there, all of a sudden maybe as curiosity builds for this 2019 signing to Kobe Dean, there is still some room for a guy like Quay Walker, a 2018 signee, to have a major impact on this Georgia defense. You heard the compliments from Smart. Let's go back and hear J.R. Reed back in July.
I expect whoever is going to make, the plays and whoever's the best going to step up because, we not only have those freshmen, but we have guys that have been waiting their turns, guys that were freshmen last year, like the Quay Walkers, you got Walter Grant. You got guys like that have been waiting their turns that it seem like we sometimes look over and the media looks over those guys. But those guys have been working really hard, and guys that have been there for a year or 2 years have been working hard. And we're really deep in every position on defense and offense, and I think that brings the best competition out of everybody, and I think the best player is going to definitely step up and play.
So at the time, I didn't want to make too much of Reed mentioning Quay Walker there because who knows how much thought he's really putting into, what he is saying on a long day of being asked a bunch of questions like the one that I asked him. But it was interesting to hear Walker's name come up back in July because I think if we're honest, we'll say at the end of the 2018 season, most of us just probably weren't quite so sure how Walker fit into Georgia's plan. He was a hyped and touted recruit, and yet we didn't see a ton of him on the field last year. But apparently J.R. Reed had seen some things from him over the course of the offseason that he liked. Kirby Smart felt good enough about him to give him a lot of playing time on Saturday, and suddenly this number one rated recruiting class from 2018 has a couple guys that have a potential chance to flourish. I still think Kobe Dean's a major part of this Georgia defense, but the idea that Quay Walker and Channing Tindall as well, who got a half a sack on Saturday, the contributions potentially coming from some of these 2018 guys is also a little bit fun to think about as well. All right, I'm going to tell you more about DawgNation Express coming up. We'll hear more from Kirby Smart on our program, but here on a Tuesday on DawgNation Daily presented by Deemer Box, it's also time to get some recruiting information. Let's talk to our buddy Jeff Sintel for our Marlo's Tavern Insider Update right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
One of my favorite pieces up at DawgNation.com is the Freshman Report that comes up after each and every game. It's a chance to maybe check your own notes against those of Jeff Sintel to find out who played, who contributed, and kind of who's in line to have a major role on this team. It's obviously more important now for Georgia than it's been in the past, just given the deep nature of this UGA roster. So with that in mind, let's begin there as part of our Marlo's Tavern Insider Update with Jeff today. Jeff, thanks for your time. Thanks for being here. Hope you're doing well, and you've made it safely back from Nashville and ready to go for a week 2 of the college football season.
Hey, Brandon, are we still on? Are we still on Broadway, man, doing a DawgNation libation? That was a long Friday night, sir.
Yeah, I would say the DawgNation libation was a success. It was really nice to get a chance to meet a lot of people. We took some fun pictures. We'll be showing some of those probably in the days and weeks to come. I thought that was a really good time, and it was really cool to see as many Georgia fans as we saw, both around downtown Nashville on Friday, obviously around the Vanderbilt campus on Saturday. That was a ton of fun, and I would say that most of those fans were mostly entertained by what they saw from Georgia on Saturday night against Vanderbilt. You crunched the numbers for your freshman report yesterday. Obviously, some of the expectations were certainly fully met. Pickens doesn't get a catch, but he was heavily involved in the offensive game plan. I think that foreshadows what's to come for him this year. On the defensive side of the ball, Nolan Smith is just chasing down people from essentially the word go. So no need to worry about him being a bust. It doesn't look like from the beginning of the game. He seemed to be pretty much what you thought he was going to be. What else were your takeaways in looking at either how the redshirt freshmen performed or those incoming true freshmen? What were your overall takeaways from having watched this thing closely as a way of putting together your freshman report?
Yeah, there's a lot of things you watch, especially when you go back and you watch your DVR copy. It looks like Georgia's doing a lot more movement along its front, doing it stemming. That's kind of the term used by football savants' mind, I guess, a little bit. And I guess one of the better indicators for me while looking, and I can always throw a lot of numbers and facts and figures into that report, but you notice the tackle leaders, Brandon, from week 1, and you didn't see those safeties in there anymore. And I don't think J.R. Reed or Richard LeCount III have gotten any worse for this season and this fall. I just think it's what Georgia's doing up front with guys like Walker and guys like Smith. You mentioned Quay Walker, Trayvon Walker as well. I mean, that last name Walker is going to get called a lot on the Georgia defense, I feel. And with Nolan, I actually had some fun on the internet where I put together a GIF or a GIF, depending on whether you're North Georgia or South Georgia. And I put together shot 47 frames on when he came in off the edge and chased down Riley Neal to stop him short of the first down stitch. And I think the only way you'll hear the term bust associated with Nolan in his Georgia career is because he's busting up yet another well-conceived offensive play.
Well, I kind of joked about this, too, yesterday. You mentioned Trayvon Walker. I think he may usher in a quickened pace of getting the kickoff out of the sport because, let's face it, player safety is a big concern right now. A 290-pound guy or whatever Walker weighs at this point in time, running as well as he does on kick coverage, that's a player safety issue, isn't it? He's going to hurt somebody before the season's done.
Okay.
We may see the kickoff leave this sport a lot quicker than some of us want it to if they're going to have guys like that on kick coverage.
Yeah, how video killed the radio star, how Trayvon Walker killed the kickoff. I got a humble prediction. On that. Some smart coach is going to go, I'm not going to get my guys killed, so that Big Mac truck is out on kickoff. I'm going to put a 295-pound offensive tackle out there to deal with him instead of having one of my upbacks deal with him.
What he looked like to me on that kick coverage thing, and he had some good plays during defense as well, it's just so noticeable on kick coverage. Every guy growing up had a guy like this in his rec league as a kid that had to come to the ballpark with his birth certificate because nobody believed he was 12 years old or whatever the age was supposed to be. Trayvon Walker looks like a guy that has to come to the stadium with his birth certificate to prove that he's not too old to be in the game.
Yeah, he has to prove that, okay, your coach sent you out here, right? This is not goal line defense. This is actually kickoff.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's so many guys, so many terms that are kind of fun, I guess, for this fan base about the new Georgia. Did you catch that part in the broadcast where the crew was making light of the fact that it's not really a good thing when your dual threat quarterback gets chased down by the outside linebackers out on the edge in a space play? But and it's not only that. I think that play was in reference to Adam Anderson, who's not even the first or second team outside backer right now for Georgia.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Hey, let me do one more thing on this, and then we're going to talk about some actual 2020 recruiting stuff. So on the subject of Azeez Ojulari, now I'll invite folks to check out your Freshman Report at DawgNation.com because I do think it's a really important part of understanding, what goes down for Georgia week to week in its games, especially when most of these games this year are not expected to be all that close. It's a chance to kind of find out the personnel, the pecking order, and I think that's an important part of the discussion. For Ojulari, how much of what we're seeing from him right now is because I think you can make a case that he is in contention to be the best player in this Georgia defense. Now, he's got some stiff competition to do that, but Ojulari is a game wrecker. 6 tackles, got to the quarterback on Saturday, was very close a couple of other times. How much of this is him developing since he left Marietta High School? How much of this was him just being an elite prospect when he came out of high school and other players just kind of got more attention? I mean, what do you attribute the fact that Ojulari is actually outshining a lot of guys, both at Georgia maybe and certainly around the country, who are more highly rated in the 2018 class than he was, and yet right now he looks like as much of a recruiting win as Georgia has gotten under Kirby Smart? What do you attribute the post-injury, the fast rise of Ojulari to?
Brennan, actually, I don't even consider it a rise. I think all this good stuff was just there all along with Mr. Ojulari. I remember covering him in high school, and sometimes you see things and you just scratch your head about the rankings sometimes because here's what it was. I think Azeez is a guy that had a 8.5 and to a 9 in every measurable category you could put him at. But he didn't have a 10 in this, or he didn't have a 9.5 in this. But I remember covering him and watching him at Marietta, Brandon, and it was basically they would put like seats up on the weight room walls in Marietta High, basically, and he would just go set those records. I mean, he was an incredible guy on the clean. He was the strongest player on the Marietta High team. He was the internal team captain, the team leader, the heartbeat, if you will. I remember a passage of his high school career, Brandon, where the right tackle gets hurt and Marietta's kind of just decimated his senior year. And Richard Morgan, who does a great job at Marietta, basically says, "Hey, Azeez, can you help us out here?" And he goes and plays right tackle for 2 games, as well as being a defensive end on the other side of the ball. we were hearing these reports, Brandon, about Aziz coming out as early as spring practice, especially late December for those Sugar Bowl practices. I feel maybe the simplest way I can describe Aziz is he is a guy that will hold up strong against the run. He will be a bull in terms of your run fits and holding the edge and setting the edge, but he can also go get the passer. And to me, it seems like Trey Scott is inside his brain with his hand on the joysticks, and Azeez Ojulari is doing exactly what he's coached to do, and then he's doing more on all of these snaps and reps. We made the point in the forum, Brandon, at some point in this spring, in the summer, Azeez was emerging as one of the top 5 players on the entire Georgia team. So to see all this stuff flash before our eyes just validates a lot of the things we've been hearing about Mr. Ojulari. And I've felt this way a long time, that Azeez Ojulari was going to be a captain of the Georgia football team before his time is over. It might even be his redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore year when that happens.
It's our Marlo's Tavern Insider Update with Jeff Sintel. And, of course, at Marlo's, they can make your entire day. It's the kind of place where lunch can kind of roll right into a happy hour. Trust me, I know this for a fact because I've done that there myself, whether it be the craft cocktails, the chef-inspired food. It's all in that twist when it comes to Marlo's. Their nice, special way of making everything just a little bit better. Find the Marlo's Tavern right there in your neighborhood, and I think you'll learn this to be true for yourself. In fact, we've got a big DawgNation event for our Marlo's matchup coming up at a Marlo's Tavern very soon. We'll be telling you a lot more about that in the days ahead. Cannot wait to do that. Jeff, let me get back to the subject of recruiting here for a moment with you. And interesting update from you at DawgNation.com yesterday on 5-star running back Kendall Milton. He becomes another one of these Georgia commits or Georgia recruiting targets to be dealing with an injury. Now, football is a violent collision sport, so you're always going to have a good bit of that. But it seems like the last couple of years, we've talked about this a little bit. Now, it sounds like Milton's situation is not too serious, but what update can you provide us on Milton being a little less than fully 100% right now?
Yeah, but I guess this is one of those rare cases when we can report on Kendall Milton's last game and share that he had a 25 yards per carry rushing average, and it not be an entirely amazing thing. He felt something in his quad where he just decided to shut it down. And I guess to explain this for the Georgia people here, it's basically like DeAndre Swift feeling something against Murray State and deciding it was best to make a business decision and maybe hold out the rest of the game against the Racers because maximum effort on his behalf was not required, especially with the balance of the season still to come. Kendall's in a situation, Connor Riley and I got to see it pretty up close when we were out there in July, and side road here, I cannot believe it's only 35 days ago when Kendall Milton committed to Georgia, something like that. It feels like it's been about 3 months, but Kendall's about the only guy they have at running back, and he's getting a lot of work. He's getting a high pitch count, a lot of usage rate. I think he had 27 carries in his season opener against a stacked, nationally rated team out of Narbonne High School. And I kind of scratched my head on this one as well, thinking I'm going to put 1 and 1 together and it'll equal 2, because Kendall Milton might very likely have more carries his senior year of high school at Buchanan High than he will ever have at the University of Georgia. Georgia likes to keep its backs right around 18 to 20 carries. And that's another thing that reinforces the notion that kids want to see, Brandon, is that they don't want to be overworked in college because they all have their Sunday dreams as well. I look for Kendall to maybe sit out again 1 more week this week because they have a big rivalry game coming up on September the 14th against an opponent that they want him to be fresh for.
He's in kind of a weird spot in the state of California in that he's a little bit farther north than where I think of the predominant powers being, and also I guess a little farther south than some of those there as well. My question is, does he have more elite competition coming up this year? Does Buchanan have another big game against a nationally known foe that would give us a chance to offer? I mean, we already know Milton's a good running back. I'm talking about more from just the entertainment standpoint. Does Milton have another really big game coming up this year?
Well, they're big, Brandon, but big for his region and his area of California. But California doesn't have the same playoff structure as the state of Georgia does. But here's what it's kind of like. Like even when we were there, folks around the school and the program told me that Kendall was the biggest high school recruit in many years, perhaps in school history, that the Fresno area just wasn't used to having this sort of announcement with 5 marquee college football programs on the table. if we wanted to localize that to the state of Georgia as well, it would kind of be like a Zamir White talent coming out of an Albany or an Augusta. We just don't see those players coming out of those areas a lot. And there's not a lot of great key players and a lot of great other players to surround himself with as well. And the thing about Kendall that even impressed me when I started writing about him about 2 years ago is he was already at the point where he could have gone to a Mater Dei or Bosco, or one of the really big programs in California, or perhaps even an IMG Academy. But this young man had a great sense of whether it's debt or appreciation in terms of the high school coaches that had built him up to be the player he had been so far, and he didn't want to take his ball and his game and run with it to greener pastures when the opportunity allowed itself to. He felt like Buchanan football helped him get to where he is, and he wanted to stay there and see what he can do with all of his senior teammates.
You know, I've talked a lot over the last couple of days about the fact that Tennessee's loss to Georgia State, I believe, is damaging to Jeremy Pruitt. I don't think it's going to cause him to get fired this year, but I do think it changes the ultimate trajectory of his career. I think he's going to become a coach that people in Knoxville, whether you be his employer, boosters, or just rank-and-file fans, he'll never have the full trust of Big Orange Nation, whatever you want to call it, the Vols for life. He'll never have their full trust. Therefore, I think this almost certainly impacts their recruiting to a certain extent. I would predict that they probably don't get a Rick Gilbert now. I don't know if that means that Georgia gets him, but I would certainly predict that Tennessee probably doesn't. Do you think I'm reading too much into an ugly, embarrassing, worst loss in program history type loss, like the one they suffered to the Panthers? Am I reading too much into that to say it's gonna prohibit Tennessee from getting a guy like a Rick Gilbert and maybe some others there as well? How damaging do you think a loss like this was to Tennessee?
Well, I think it is damaging. And, you know, what was that thing we saw that a member of the volunteer Navy, one of those vessels caught on fire before the game? Well, that fire might have gotten put out, but I think the fire in Tennessee has not gotten put out and might not be for a while. I think the thing with Mr. Gilbert, though, is there's a strong connection there with Harrison Bailey and the fact that those guys, you know, have such a kinship, and he knows that if he goes to a place where Harrison Bailey's the quarterback, that those two have a rapport and a connection where he knows he'll probably get balls. I think that's the strongest tether right now between a Tennessee right now and what Eric Gilbert. And aside from maybe Georgia State using a 260-pound wide receiver to decimate the volunteer secondary, you know, I think that's something that, you know, you and I kind of laughed about when we were in Nashville. I mean, that's about the only good way that the Georgia State loss could help the Volunteers, if a big-bodied, sized receiver just became somebody the Volunteers could not cover. I think with Gilbert and a lot of guys, I think there's a clear parallel here. You know, you and I were talking about this over the weekend. It's not quite like Nick Saban and his track record losing to Louisiana Lafayette or Louisiana Monroe in year one at Alabama, because Nick Saban had established the standard. It's kind of like Georgia and Kirby Smart, you know, struggling with a Vanderbilt, losing to a Vanderbilt in his first year, but also there were a couple pillow fights Georgia had that first year with a Nicholls State. Everybody remembers a lot of games that year where Georgia kind of had to hold on with its fingernails to beat a lot of teams, but they did beat those teams. And the fact that Georgia was able to do that, let's face it, that staff at Georgia still had elite recruiters and great recruiters, but it would have been awfully hard to spin a Nicholls State loss or, you know, everything else the Georgia team kind of struggled with down the road that year, including the loss to Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Let me squeeze in one more on this subject. I mean, a lot of people would say that the real foe for Georgia when it comes to Jordan Burch is probably Clemson, but he is a Columbia native. How about South Carolina losing to North Carolina? What do you think that does to a guy like Burch?
Yeah, I don't know if he kind of figured that he'd fall out of love with South Carolina in September or late August as compared to October or November. But, you know, the one thing I want to say about this situation there is it's a tough break for Jake Bentley, because he's been a guy that's done some good things for Carolina. But it kind of reminds me, Brandon, of Jake Fromm and Jake Beeson here. That Ryan Helinski kid is very good, and now that's his program for the near future. And I would expect Helinski to play well for the Carolina Gamecocks going forward, and he might be able to help them in a couple of these games more so than folks might think. I would expect Helinski to probably play with the head and demeanor and poise. It's pretty close to what Jake Fromm did for Georgia in 2017.
Boy, that'll be interesting to see. I want to ask you a question about Darnell Washington to close our conversation out in just a moment. But here, as a part of our Marlo's Tavern Insider Update, let me take a quick pause. And on DawgNation Daily presented by Deemer Box, I want to talk about the big event that I announced yesterday. And I want to make sure everybody is fully aware of this. And, Jeff, I know you're excited about this. We're going to unveil our very first time ever doing what we're going to call the DawgNation Express. We're going to leave in, luxury motor coaches from out of the Atlanta area on Saturday afternoon, early Saturday afternoon, like a noon departure, something along those lines, on September 21st, going to Athens for the biggest game of the season. You're going to be riding in style, and then when you arrive, you're going to be a part of an all-inclusive tailgate that's got your beverage taken care of, your food taken care of. We're going to have TV set up. We're going to have music going. I'm going to be there. Jeff, I know you're going to be there as well. We put this thing on sale yesterday, and I warned a lot of folks that this was going to sell out really fast. And already, it's not sold out yet, but we have sold a lot of tickets to this. So you got to go to this website, DawgNationExpress.com, to be a part of this all-inclusive event, which includes your motor coach transportation, food and beverage at your tailgate. It's like a 5-minute walk from the stadium to the stadium from the tailgate. This is a perfect location, a great event. If you don't have tickets for the game, you can actually watch the game from the tailgate. So if you want the Athens experience without paying $1,000 a ticket or whatever it is to get into the game, this gives you a chance to do that. DawgNationExpress.com, the place to go to get your tickets for this. I promise you these are going to sell out fast. We're already selling a ton. This is going to be one of the biggest events we do in the calendar year of 2019. DawgNation Express coming up on September 21st. Please go to the website to find out more information on that. Jeff, I know you're excited about being there.
Yeah, that's smart business, man. A lot of people, if they want to find a little dark lining in a silver cloud about going to Georgia games these days, it's the travel back on 316. It's finding a place to get there and getting your tailgate up and everything ready. So it seems like the plan here is to basically kind of take all the worries and take all the stress away from that for the Atlanta area Bulldog and to ride with fellow Bulldogs up and down 316 and make their way to the university. And maybe enjoy a libation or two as well.
Yeah, no one's going to have a bigger and better tailgate experience that day. It's a luxury tailgate experience, all-inclusive. DawgNation, excited to be a part of it. We're able to offer tickets at kind of a discounted rate compared to what they would be, compared to the value because of the sponsors. They're going to be a part of that with us. So DawgNationExpress.com, you can find out more about how you can be a part of the tailgate for the biggest game of the season. All right, one more thing as part of our Marlo's Tavern Insider Update, and this will be semi-video only. Up the podcast radio audience, I'll have to describe this, but I saw on Twitter a pretty cool piece of video involving Georgia recruiting target Darnell Washington, who catches a ball, showcases a very nice stiff arm, and then a pretty good spin move after that. You know, one of the things, Jeff, that you and I have had a lot of private conversations about is the comparison between Darnell and a Rick Gilbert. And I've told you before, and I've tried to be very honest about this, that the thing I like about Gilbert is that he shows up in games. This isn't a project. This isn't he projects to one day be really good based on his athleticism. No, he's got stats and he's got highlights to back up what all the accolades are about. He plays well in games. I love seeing this from Darnell Washington out in Nevada, a level of competition, admittedly, that I don't know quite as much about, but it certainly shows me that he's also getting experience with the ball in his hand. He's not just a 7-on-7 phenomenon. He's playing 11-on-11 on Friday nights there as well. It's a cool highlight, but I also take it as a semi-important part of Washington's evaluation. Where do you come down on that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't care how athletic and how jaw-dropping or first guy off the bus a guy is. If he can't play, then that's a major flag. I remember when I was a Cub reporter coming up, I would always have a test with my wife. My girlfriend at the time or whatever, fiance later. But it was basically a situation where I would go to a game, and this is some story for another day. But she would kind of be watching the game with me, helping me out with tackles and stuff like that. And I would always have a test for her. I would say, okay, there's a player here that has all the big offers, Alabama, whatever. And I said, I want you to tell me who it is by just watching this game. And I would call it the novice test or the uninformed test. I would say, which one of these guys so far do you think is the one that's the big time player? And if that guy's name wasn't called 2 or 3 times in a quarter, and he wasn't the guy always around the ball or making the plays, that was a big red flag, because all this is great, what you do in 7-on-7s and in shorts and how fast you can run, and these agility times are fine. But if you can't translate that over to the football game, you don't get any points for looking good in a uniform or running fast. Yeah. And to me, there's no barometer. There's nothing more important here than the game film. The DNA of a player himself is his game film and what he does on tape when everybody's watching, especially the high school players that everyone knows about. And all week, that coordinators, the coaches, the assistants all week, they said, don't let John X beat us. Don't let them beat us. And when the young man rises to the level of competition, and he looks like the best player on the field, clearly, where there's only like 2 or 3 college players on the field total, that says something, because when they get to college, they're going to have to be asked to do the same things where everyone on the field is a college player. So Darnell, he's got a great highlight tape. He's got some plays where the defense is trying all they can, and he's just better than the scheme, and that's what you see a lot with Mr. Washington.
Yeah, that's really good, Jeff. That's a great description. I look forward to reading a bunch more from you about him at DawgNation.com, and I know we'll be talking about these names a lot in the days to come. Appreciate you being here as part of our Marlo's Tavern Insider Update today. Hope you have a great day, and we'll enjoy the chance to chat with you again soon.
All right. Hope everybody gets on the bus with BA for this weekend.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Just to be clear, the big bus is not this weekend. The good news is, unlike Georgia's bus for road games, which only has room for 70, we might have room for more than 70 on ours, but the big moment comes up Saturday, September 21st for the biggest game of the season. It's our DawgNation Express, all-inclusive tailgate experience, which includes luxury motor coach travel. Go to DawgNationExpress.com. You can find out more about that. We've even got a gift pack for you as well. This is going to be really, really fun. It's going to be like DawgNation Days of Summer on Wheels or kind of anything like that. We've done some really awesome stuff lately. DawgNation Express is going to be one of the biggest things that we do in the calendar year of 2019. And I don't say that lightly because I know some of the stuff we have planned. DawgNation Express is going to be massive, massive fun. By the way, speaking of DawgNation Days of Summer, boy, how much fun we had back in June when we were at Callaway Resort and Gardens. Well, guess what? We are coming up on the fall time of the year. In fact, we are at the fall time of the year. And this season is kind of cool in the fact that Georgia has 2 bye weeks this year. Now, listen, I'm going to tell you this right now. You want to have a good use of a Saturday without Georgia football? Go to Callaway Resort and Gardens. If you're watching on video right now, just off to your left, you can see Cason's, which is a really fun sports bar type setup where you can watch some of the other games that are going on. You get fall weather at Callaway Resort and Gardens, you've got one of the best weekends you can enjoy. I'm one of these guys that and most of the people who work with me will probably tell this as well. I'm kind of wound a little tight sometimes. So a relaxing weekend away, but only a short drive from Atlanta. No real traffic issues to worry about. That's what you need. Callaway Resort and Gardens offers that. So check them out, CallawayGardens.com. You can find out more about that. Play the golf courses as well. The Mountain View course, I've played that. The Lakeside course, I know is a ton of fun. I have not played that one. But play some golf, watch some football. Get over to Callaway Resort and Gardens during one of these UGA bye weeks. All right, a couple things here. I'm going to defend the SEC just for a moment. And I know it may seem like that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm kind of a self-admitted SEC homer. But here is a part of DawgNation Daily presented today by Deemer Box. I do think there is something kind of important that needs to be said in regards to what happened on Saturday with Tennessee embarrassing itself, Missouri embarrassing itself, South Carolina embarrassing itself, Ole Miss, not a favorite, but still lost at Memphis. Mississippi State, not much better. It's not like Kentucky dominated Toledo. Here's the point I got to make, though. There are a lot of people who are going to say, well, all conferences are essentially the same. Every conference got its bad teams, and for the most part, every conference got an elite team or two. The SEC is no different. But in this regard, I do believe the SEC is different because the SEC is not just top-heavy at the top with a couple good teams. Obviously, Alabama and Georgia are pretty clearly national championship contenders. I think LSU looks that part. I think LSU is going to win easily against Texas on the road on Saturday. That is a top-tier team that also finds itself in the SEC. And then after that, you get into a pretty substantial middle tier. Team 3, Team 4, Team 5, Team 6. In some order is Auburn, Florida, Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M, I don't expect to beat Clemson on Saturday, but Texas A&M is no easy out. If that is, along with Florida, who wasn't great in week 0, but still won against Miami, Auburn, who had a very impressive win against Oregon, if that's the middle portion of your SEC, if that's almost to the 50th percentile of your conference, I'm sorry, you're not all that top-heavy. I mean, ultimately, here is what I believe the SEC is, and this is what it makes it different than virtually every other conference in the country, with maybe the exception of the Big Ten, which probably comes the closest. If you are an average team trying to become bowl eligible, you are probably not sweating a lot of SEC teams right now. If you're an average team trying to get bowl eligible, let's say you're Vanderbilt, for instance. Can Vanderbilt beat Tennessee? They have. Can Vanderbilt beat Missouri? Based on what we saw on Saturday, very likely so. South Carolina, that's a winnable game. There are a lot of SEC West teams right now I don't think you're scared of at all. The 2 Mississippi schools, probably Arkansas. You're not worried about them whatsoever. So if you're an average team trying to get bowl eligible, then yeah, you can feast on a few of these sort of bottom 50th percentile SEC teams. But if you're an elite team trying to win a national championship, the SEC is the last place you want to be, because the Auburns, the Floridas, the Texas A&Ms, the LSU, Georgia, Alabama, they are good enough to beat anyone on any given Saturday. And the only conference that can match that is probably the Big Ten, who at the very top, certainly Ohio State, probably Michigan, maybe Penn State, can do that. But once you get down to, like that middle tier, that middle quartet, I guess, or quartile, maybe the better word to use, the Michigan States, the Nebraskas, the Iowas, the teams like Wisconsin, they're not bringing that same level of recruiting prowess that even Florida has, and certainly Auburn and Texas A&M have. So a lot of SEC critics out there right now, but let's not exaggerate the current state of this conference. There's still about half the teams in this league that rank among the top 12 in the country. That's not quite so bad, all things considered. A couple other quick SEC stories to get to. As Jeff Sentell said, Jake Bentley is now out for South Carolina, will be for a number of weeks. This is one of those weird situations where the national media loves Bentley. Gamecocks fans haven't always done so. Now, they're not glad he's hurt, I don't think, but bringing in Ryan Helinski in place of him, I think this is probably a move that most South Carolina fans welcome, especially on the heels of a pretty bad day for South Carolina against North Carolina. And I have to admit something. I didn't expect to do this. I found myself rooting for Notre Dame a little bit last night. Now, I got talked into taking them as a 20-point favorite. I should have never done that. But I found myself kind of rooting for them a little bit, because when it's 14-14 early, all I could envision was this epic matchup we have scheduled in Athens for September 21st. This thing's going to fizzle into nothing because Fighting Irish cannot stop the Louisville running game, which does not bode well for what's going to happen for the Irish when they come to Athens. But at least they won. All of a sudden, this matchup's kind of still in place for now. Georgia-Notre Dame as a big-time TV product at 8 p.m. on September 21st and a very hot ticket at Sanford Stadium. Let me also, before I hear from Kirby Smart again, preview some of the top matchups for this upcoming weekend. You've got West Virginia coming to Missouri. Missouri looking to get revenge. My early thought is they probably will do so. I'm curious to see Vanderbilt going to Purdue. Obviously, Purdue's got that one really good running back, but this is a game that I think that Vanderbilt probably could win. We shall see. A&M and Clemson, I don't quite think A&M's ready for this yet, but it would be certainly fun to watch them keep it close. That may be wishful thinking. I saw this on BYU Tennessee. Tennessee right now, I guess, a 3-point favorite. Unless what I saw online yesterday was a typo. This game opened at BYU -3 and quickly ran the other direction to Tennessee -3, which is a disaster for the sports books if that's really indeed the case. It could have been a typo, but I know for a fact that's what I saw. Honestly, I think the people who expect Tennessee's season to be over because of the Georgia State loss may be disappointed on Saturday, but Pruitt's career, I do think that was greatly injured by what happened a week ago. Get LSU in Texas, the game of the week, I believe. I'm really excited about that one. And then Arkansas and Ole Miss coming out of the SEC is there as well. So if you're looking ahead to week 2, not a ton of prestigious matchups, although LSU, Texas, A&M, Clemson's about as good as it can get. We'll make that your SEC. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Deemer Box, the really cool tailgate apparatus that has got the Bluetooth speakers and waterproof carrying case, and just incredibly nice for whatever you're doing in the outdoors, especially college football tailgates. Let me get back to Kirby Smart for a moment, because Georgia coasted an easy win against Vanderbilt on Saturday, but the big story around the league and really around college football were these SEC teams that lost. Ugly for South Carolina and losing its lead against North Carolina. Embarrassing for Missouri, going to Laramie, Wyoming. As I said yesterday, no one's ever traveled to Laramie, Wyoming voluntarily. The fact that Missouri did was its first mistake. It gets there, it loses that game. That's not a great look. And then the unmitigated disaster that was Tennessee. Kirby was asked about, hey, what do you make of these teams that you play that look terrible week one? As you might imagine, Kirby's eye is squarely on the ball. He is not all that worried about that. Here's what he said.
Nothing that those programs have going on has anything to do with us. I mean, we're 100% concerned with the improvements we have to make. We've got so much work to do from a discipline standpoint, timing and passing game, a lot of things to work on that our focus is us and our opponent, Murray State.
I'd also say that's probably supposed to be true for fans there as well, because the one thing you do hear some talk about is, as much as you enjoy watching and laughing at Tennessee losing, maybe South Carolina as well, and I guess to a certain extent Missouri, some Georgia fans are then left to wonder, well, gosh, what does this do to Georgia's strength of schedule? What's going to be the national perception of Georgia now that the SEC East look to be as weak as it has been in quite some time after seemingly taking a step forward in 2018? I guess my thought on that is I don't think you have too much to worry about in terms of a strength of schedule or perception of Georgia. First of all, strength of schedule is the kind of thing the media talks about all the time, but ultimately no one's made the playoff on the basis of their strength of schedule. We've got a 5-year track record of this. 20 different teams over the last 5 seasons have made the playoff. None of them have made it because of strength of schedule. That's not what gets you into the playoff, in other words. Plus, from an ESPN FPI standpoint, at the beginning of the year, Georgia's strength of schedule was number 5. So even if it softens up a little bit, Georgia had some room for that based on the analytics and the number crunching that went on before the season began. Georgia's job is still the same as it always was. It's got to win the SEC to make the college football playoff. If it wins the SEC, it's got nothing to worry about. Most of Georgia's regular season games were thought to be a cakewalk anyway. Tennessee, South Carolina, Missouri losing, I think, only furthers that point that much more. But we'll have to wait and see for those games coming up pretty soon. I do think it's going to be interesting on the subject of Tennessee, and boy, I'm already seeing a lot of online chatter about this, social media type stuff. The push to maybe take over Neyland Stadium the way that Vanderbilt Stadium was taken over on Saturday. Now, you can't get 80% of a 100,000-seat stadium, I don't reckon. But in terms of it being, there were at least 20,000 Georgia fans in LSU a year ago. I know that doesn't work out to the tune of the win, but the fan showing was still impressive. If you can get that many people traveling to Baton Rouge, which is not a close trip, Knoxville, a lot easier to imagine 20,000, maybe even more for that game coming up in a few weeks. That could be a fun fan storyline to watch. Here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Deemer Box, let me also say we do our Gatorade Updater. It's now been 1,039 days since Florida's beaten Georgia. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Deemer Box. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We will roll through all your comments on anything you want to discuss from today's show. Aftermath of what happened against Vanderbilt. Looking ahead, probably not quite so much to Murray State, but certainly the next couple of weeks. Are y'all like me? I don't like Notre Dame at all and can't stand, in the sporting sense anyway, can't stand the people who always vouch for them. But last night I kind of found myself at 14-14 saying, are y'all really going to just choke this game away to start the season? Can't you wait a little bit longer to prove to the entire world that you were overrated once again? Does it have to come week one? Little life last night from Scott Satterfield's team, though. That was a better Louisville team than I expected to see. So pretty entertaining there on that regard.
I'd just like to point out Notre Dame had a drive late to cover and got into Louisville territory. So, you may not want to throw too much shade at someone for telling you that Notre Dame was going to cover when they nearly did.
I feel like Louisville felt like the right side for most of the game in that one. Also, I didn't mention your name on that.
If you watch our R.S. Andrews pick show, you made it pretty clear that I had talked you into Notre Dame.
You did talk me into it, but I was trying to be a gentleman and not call you out for that. Lavelle Hughes says that Zeus is going to be 1,000-yard back by season's end. I do think Lavelle, the way that Georgia's going to use Zamir White, is going to be different than it was in game one. We saw him kind of coming in as essentially the fourth running back in the second half. His debut comes. I don't think there's any way that Zamir White's only the fourth best running back on this Georgia roster right now. I don't think that's the case. I think that you will see him use more. Now, 1,000 yards is going to be hard to get. And I thought one of the real stories from Saturday was the way that after, there'd been a lot said about DeAndre Swift, and it wasn't all great going into the Vanderbilt game. And, boy, I thought he really showed up and stepped up and said, hey, I'm still a major part of this offense. Y'all don't go shopping around for other playmakers when you got me toting the rock. I thought that was a real story there as well, which was a nice thing to be able to see. But I do believe that Zamir is a big part of this, a big part of this offense, whether it's 1,000 yards or not.
Are we sure Zamir White's not the fourth best running back on Georgia's team? Because James Cook looked really good in that first half, and James Cook also didn't fumble the ball.
So, admittedly, Cook played more on Saturday than I expected him to. That is something that I think the Georgia coaching staff should get some credit for. So, for their attempt to be explosive, we talked about the word explosive off the top today. The attempt to be explosive from Georgia offensively was certainly there. Cook is one of your explosive weapons. They're trying to use him there in that regard. A lot of two-back sets, which I think is a really, really interesting formation for this level of Georgia talent to have it manipulated in that way, I think is really interesting. Is it possible that Cook is just ahead of Zamir White on the depth chart right now? I'd be surprised if that was the case, but I guess I was surprised by what I saw on Saturday there as well. Kibo Weir also stepping up here to get a pound of flesh against me for my own personal maybe failing of not touting for James Cook enough, and that's probably a fair thing to do. Before we move on to the show, let me also thanks R.S. Andrews for being a part of this. You know, you can get their $99 Smiley tune-up and get your air conditioning unit back to factory fresh specs. I think that's something you want to do because, did I see this correctly? It's going to be darn near 100 degrees in Athens on Saturday, and I don't say that lightly. I want to say the temperature is like 96 or something like that. Y'all, it's going to be just as hot in your house, too, if you don't have your air conditioning running the way that it's supposed to. And this time of year, those things have been working all summer long. They start to slow down just a little bit. Some of them start to, old gray mare, she ain't what she used to be. On some of those units you've had running for 20-something years, if it goes out on you this weekend, you are going to be miserable. So get it tuned up. Get it back to factory fresh specs. Use my friend at R.S. Andrews to do that. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles for a long time, and they have only one question. How can they deliver a smile for you today? So check them out online at rsandrews.com. All right. Robert Barnes, also in the subject of creative usage. Eli Wolf as a fullback, I thought was a very, very nice thing to see, and a really cool thing there.
Kirby dispelled the notion that he was a fullback. That was sort of just a goal line sort of package thing. He made very clear yesterday in his press conference that Eli Wolf is not a fullback and is still a tight end.
That feels tedious to me.
I'm just reporting what I saw and heard.
That feels. No, I mean, I'm not disputing what you're saying, but that feels like a tedious semantic argument at that point in time. Nonetheless, it was nice to see him lining up right behind the quarterback as a fullback typically would. All right, let me get a few more here, and we'll pop over to YouTube here too. There was something I was going to read, and I lost it. Now, Dad. Frank Crowder says we still need to throw the tight ends more, especially with the top tight end recruits watching. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the Georgia offense kind of is what it is, and what it is mostly really good. Statistically speaking, it was one of the 5 best in the country last year. But in terms of drastically rewiring itself just because you went from Jim Chaney to James Coley, as we said on this program a million times, that was never, I believe, Kirby Smart's intent. And I think you saw more examples of that on Saturday. Now, the good news is, to win a national championship, I don't think you need 50% new and different stuff. You need just a little bit better in a few different spots. With the phrase that Kirby likes to use, the composite of aggregate gains or something like that. Just a little bit better here, a little bit better there, a couple more pass attempts, another big completion. For instance, if there's no hold on that D-Rob throw, that's your offense right there. You need 2 of those per game. And really, the Keiris Jackson one would have been the other one. I mean, that's essentially it right there. But yeah, in terms of this magically being the kind of offense that's going to having tight ends running these, exotic routes the way that Rick Gilbert said he wants to run them, that's just probably not Georgia. And Georgia's going to have to convince guys that, well, when you come, because of how unique you are, we're going to do that more with you, which We'll work on some, maybe not on others.
Is there any one player, though, and I get Gilbert and other guys wanted to see them do that, but is there any one player worth radically changing and catering your offense to try and land? Especially at a school like Georgia where they already have so much other talent. And if you're trying to do that, if you're trying to give 15, 20-yard corner routes to Charlie Warner, as much as I like Charlie and as much as I think Charlie's a good player, that's taking the ball out of Demetrius Robertson's hands, Matt Lander's hands, possibly Lawrence Cager's hands, George Pickens even.
So I think you're right to say that while I might tell you that you should drastically alter your offense if you had a Rick Gilbert, I don't think that you should necessarily drastically alter your offense as a way of getting a Rick Gilbert. However, from a philosophical standpoint, if you gave me the choice of throwing more to tight ends or throwing more to a third receiver, I'd probably rather throw more to tight ends just from a philosophical standpoint. But at the college game, because of the way the quarterback reads and progressions work, throwing to tight ends is hard. I mean, almost every tight end in the NFL that catches big throws was not getting a ton of catches at the college level. It's pretty significant how much more NFL teams use tight ends than college teams do, because I believe it's because of the complicated nature of the NFL offenses and the quarterback's ability to process that in real time on the field. Even a good field general, coach on the field quarterback like Fromm is only going to have so much success at throwing to the tight end. It's just hard to do at the college level. Alabama's had as good tight ends as anybody does, and even they've had mixed results in throwing to them. So yeah, there's that. Kibo Weir says once Fromm can close out the game and stop going cold when the defense stops the run, I'm straight on him. Yeah, it was not a perfect game for Fromm on Saturday. It was not a perfect game for Fromm at all. We talked about the stats on that off the top of the program, that you've got to be just a little bit more efficient with the throws that really matter, the ones that are 15 and 20 yards down the field. That's how you change the offense. You don't have to become a Big 12 team overnight, but you got to be a little bit better in that regard. And on Saturday, this wasn't even to me the typical Fromm game. This is actually pretty substantially below the typical Fromm game, especially after those first few drives. Now, I said this yesterday. I'm not even going to pretend to know if after the Georgia got some easy points, got on the board, if they decided from a schematic standpoint to stop calling interesting plays and just be good enough and happy enough to get an easy win. I think there's an element of that could be wishful thinking for the people who want to believe that's true. I think there's also an element of it's very difficult to know what an offense was truly trying to do and what it was actually attempting to execute. So I won't be able to say that one way or another. But the results speak for themselves, that the overall productivity was less than you want it to be. The other thing is, and this is maybe fair, maybe it's not, for a lot of teams, when you're watching them play, I'm no fan of Jalen Hurts, but this is certainly true for him on Sunday night. It's been true for Tua Tagovailoa for a couple of years. Even with Travis Etienne dominating for Clemson this past Thursday, this is still true for Lawrence. You never take your mind off of the quarterback for some of these teams. The Hurts, the Tuas, the Jalens, Justin Fields, probably at Ohio State, had that look on Saturday. We'll see how it goes for a full season. But you never stop thinking about them. When you play against Georgia, you do, I think, find yourself thinking about things other than quarterback a lot. He's not the larger-than-life figure that's bigger than the other 21 guys in the field at any given moment. Now, that may be partially a testament to just how much talent Georgia has, but it is an interesting comparison in the way that we obsess over these other quarterbacks when they are, marching down the field. And with Fromm, we don't think of him in the same kind of outsized way. At least I believe that's true.
So do you think Fromm had a bad, might not be the right word, but it seems like you don't seem to think Fromm had a good game?
I don't think he had a good game.
What more would you? So what did he do poorly then?
I don't know. Just I thought the results were substandard.
You got to give me a little. If you got to give me something there.
He can't be 6.8 yards per attempt. He just can't.
Okay, but if he doesn't have a holding penalty, and he completes that 53-yard pass to Robertson, that completely changes his yards per attempt.
That's totally fine. But
I'd also add that Georgia had 14 runs of more than 10 yards, which was the most in the country this week, and that was against a Vanderbilt team that went to a bowl, as opposed to some of the other cupcakes that Ohio State, Clemson were beating up on a year ago.
Yeah, I think that the Georgia running game was pretty spectacular, and even with the short yardage stuff that I asked Kirby Smart about, and I thought for a second he was about to lay into me on. even with that, I thought this was more of what we've seen from Georgia, which is really, really good, and probably stopping just short of being great. And as we said off the top of the program, those explosive plays, the need to collect those, that one way or another is going to be the difference between a national championship and not.
But those plays aren't going to be the difference in a Vanderbilt game that they were winning by 21 midway through the second quarter.
Could very well be the case. I'm not in any way saying this is indicative of what the rest of the season is going to be, but nonetheless. And TM also on YouTube bringing up the point that Connor made, that everything changes, the D-Rob catch is allowed to count. That's probably true. I would also say that you can't completely negate a holding penalty, even though I went back and watched the replay and I couldn't quite tell, how much of a hold I really thought there was, but you still got to count, the holding play there on that. Hasheem Spikes seems confident that once we saw how dominant the offensive line was, the coaches reeled it in on offense. And that may have been the case. Now, speaking of the offensive line, I thought John Stinchcomb made a very good point about this yesterday, that, we'll kind of fixate on the two short yardage situations that Georgia went for it, didn't get it. But, John's point was he wants to see this group do a little bit better in pass protection. I wrote about this a couple weeks ago at DawgNation.com, that when you're facing what looks like an obvious passing down near the end of the half, for instance, is certainly an example of that when you're looking to throw the ball, or when you're facing a short yardage situation, which is an obvious running down, that even a very good offensive line like Georgia, or an offensive line that might really be the best in college football, there's only so much that group's going to be able to do against a play calling situation where the intent is probably obvious. And I think that's what Georgia got itself into a little bit of an issue with a couple times on Saturday. Probably need better pass protection, and certainly Fromm would be aided by that. Dapper Dan says you can't forget that Fromm put us in the spot to score again before the Kieras fumble. No, you can't. And, Fromm's already proven that he can make big throws, then he can have big games for Georgia. I just don't happen to think Saturday was one of them. But he's already proven he can do that. And the fact that he played less than a stellar game, at least in my mind on Saturday, I don't think is an indictment of his future in any regard, form, or fashion. It doesn't even really concern me. I just calling balls and strikes here, I didn't think it was a great effort. Not great effort. I didn't think it was one of his better performances. Chime Dog also on YouTube says, way too many holding penalties. Makes me wonder if our huge offensive line might not be quick enough.
Well, one of those holding penalties was on Charlie Warner on the Robertson pass. That was on Warner, so that's not really on the offensive line there. And I believe there was only one other one over the course of the game, which was on Kinley. Holding it happens in the course of the game, and sometimes,
There were three holdings, though, right?
I thought there were only two.
Maybe you're right. I do think, though, that if you are an opponent of Georgia, one of the things that you're going to obviously do is, because no one can match their size, and it might be that no one can match their physicality. So you are going to try to attack them differently, and quickness is the only way to do that. So in terms of how teams are going to try to negate what Georgia does, teams are going to use quickness there. So in a short yardage situation, they're just going to try to get off the ball more quickly and get pad level, lower sooner. That's the only way that you can attack that, because, big matters in football, and if you're trying to be big on big, but you're not quite as big, then obviously we all know how that's going to work out. Joe Brummel says that Kieras' hand was shattered by a Vandy player punching him with a hard cast. I didn't know that, but that's obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he essentially broke his hand, his right hand. His hand got broken, and that's why he fumbled the ball.
Now I did know that, but I didn't know it was coming due to another player with a hard cast. That's, if true, pretty interesting. Aaron Gore says it's sad to see fans disappointed with their Dogs' performance. All three phases were great. If you love airing out and not playing defense, go find a Big 12 team to cheer for. Now, Aaron, I believe that's an exaggeration of how people have felt coming off of this game. I also think it's an exaggeration to say that the three phases were, quote, great. I don't even think any of the players themselves would call it great. This is one of those things where we're going to have to be able to have a nuanced conversation about how things are going. I told you yesterday, a part of our program, that for the Georgia fans who were disappointed either in our forum at forum.dawgnation.com or on our postgame show, the DawgNation postgame show on the DawgNation video channels, I said for those people who are disappointed, I think you're taking the wrong cues. I think you got to take your cue from Kirby Smart, who for the most part seemed to be, really satisfied by, by what he saw, or at least not publicly admitting to being disappointed. That's a cue that you take. However, at the same time, we got a full week between what happened against Vanderbilt and what's going to happen against Murray State this upcoming Saturday, and the games that really matter beyond that. I don't think you can expect fans not to pay close attention to the things that were present on Saturday that do need to be better. As we said before, to keep it on the defensive side for a moment, the ability to turn what looked to be some aggressive attempts into Georgia into impactful negative plays. Quarterback pressures and hurrying a quarterback's rhythm is not going to be enough. You can affect the game somewhat that way, but in the modern game, when everyone's getting yards and everyone's getting points, you've got to subtract from those yardage totals, which is what a sack provides you, subtracting from those yardage totals, moving people back with negative plays. You've got to have some of that to protect yourself, and Georgia is going to need more than that. Now, in the audio we played from Kirby a little earlier, he was right that teams now design their offense to get rid of the football quickly. You better believe you see that on Sundays now. The NFL has become a quick passing league almost exclusively, to the extent which some of the highly paid pass rushers are thought to maybe not be quite worth the money they used to be because of how quickly teams get rid of the football now. That's the chess match that's going on. Offenses want to get rid of the ball quickly to negate the athletes on the other side. And as Kirby said, defensively, they're trying to figure out ways not to do that. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to, how many guys can you drop back into coverage to slow the offense down and give a guy like an Aziz or a Nolan or somebody like that a chance to get the football. So what you saw from Georgia was, I think, a lot of what you expected. A lot of really, really good. Another game that was not close for Georgia in the SEC and in its division. You'll probably see a lot of those. But that collection of evidence that shows that Georgia really has turned the corner and is now as elite, as top of the line as the Alabamas and Clemsons, I think you're still waiting to see some more of that. Tram Dog says about, the difference between Georgia and the teams that pass a lot is that Georgia has 4 back averaging 9 yards to carry. Yeah, I mean, Georgia's never going to be, nor should it be, one of the passingest teams in college football. It's got too much talent at the running back position and too much invested in really big offensive linemen to do that. That's exactly right. But you need a little bit more than what you brought to the table in 2018 if you want to win the national championship. Preston Brown says, Vandy was shut down. Havoc rate was good. Have you people ever played football before? UGA been with Alabama and Clemson. I'd be curious to know what the percentage of havoc rate ended up being.
Jordan Davis said it was about 11%.
Which is not good.
Well, it's not what their stated goal is, but for all the talk about havoc rate, again, Vandy didn't score in the second half, didn't score a touchdown.
But this particular commenter is bringing up havoc rate being good. I mean, they're trying to get 20%, which essentially puts you in the top 10 of the country if you can get to 20%. 11% by their own standard is not what they would call good. Keith Simmons says, I was satisfied overall with the first game. Keith, if that's the word that you want to use, I'll agree with you on that. I was completely satisfied. I thought it was fine performance. I'd give it about a B. I certainly wouldn't give it a B minus. Certainly wouldn't give it an A. You want to debate between a B and a B plus? I can listen to that. But this wasn't a perfect performance, and maybe if you're a coach, imperfect after week 1 is exactly where you want to be.
And that's where Georgia always wants to be, because they know that chasing perfection, you never catch it. They want to I believe the cliche is chase perfection and fall back on excellence.
Johnny Lester says, I hope Fromm watches highlights of Fields and Eason firing the ball downfield with authority and gets inspired to do the same. So Fields I can't speak on because I haven't really seen him play other than getting a chance to see him play a little bit on Saturday. But I saw a full year of Eason. I am fully confident that Fromm's a better deep ball thrower than Eason is, even though Eason's got a much stronger arm. If I had, a 90-second drill starting the 5-yard line, somewhere where you're going to have to make some big throws to get it done at some point in time, I'll still take Fromm over Eason in that regard. We'll find out more about Fields over the course of a long season, especially when Big Ten play begins. I know Eason made some big throws on Saturday, but I am fully confident based on seeing Fromm for the first time in 2017, Eason for the full year in 2016. That's an apples-to-apples comparison. Fromm was the better player, so I got a lot of respect for Jacob Eason. I think he's an entertaining player to watch. I can't wait to watch him play some of his big games this year, but I am fully confident that Fromm's the better of the two players.
did throw the ball downfield. He had the long pass to Robertson. He had the pass to Kyrus Jackson. He had a long pass to Lawrence Cager as well. And they really didn't throw the ball 20 yards plus downfield other than those 3 opportunities. And second of all, Jacob Eason in Washington playing Eastern Washington. That's an FCS team. Vanderbilt's an SEC East team. Derek Mason's a pretty good defensive mind. And Vanderbilt's a team that went to a bowl game last year. And based on the way some of the other SEC East teams looked this week, Vanderbilt, while their offense struggled, their defense looked a lot better than, say, Tennessee's did and Missouri's did.
Yeah, I don't think Vanderbilt's losing to Georgia State if it plays them on Saturday. I don't think it's going to lose at Wyoming, and I don't think it would certainly have a very good chance of beating North Carolina on a neutral site there as well. So I didn't think that Vanderbilt was the worst team in the SEC coming into this game, and I feel even more strongly about that after the fact. I definitely think this is a Vanderbilt team that's going to knock on the door of having a chance to be bowl eligible. It would not surprise me to see them win at Purdue on Saturday.
I would just add that Vanderbilt's also smart enough to not schedule a game at Wyoming.
Yeah, so. Of all the things there, that's what makes Missouri look so bad. I kind of briefly wrote about this a little bit on Sunday. Missouri is such an SEC outlier. Kind of everything about the program is just different than the typical SEC school. They don't draw very many fans. Prior to Barry Odom, they ran a very different kind of, offensive style of play, for sure. The Pinkel era certainly fit in more with the Big 12 than it did the SEC. And to kind of accentuate that point even more, going to Laramie, Wyoming to play a game is about the least SEC thing you can ever do, and losing the game is their just punishment for doing that. Let me go back over to Facebook for a moment. We'll get a few more comments. Dante Rivers says Vandy will beat a couple teams in the East. Yeah, I think they have a very good chance to. I'm still not sold on Kentucky, even though they got the week 1. Matt Rukavina says he's admitting his mistake. Matt, what mistake are you admitting? About something about Missouri. What did he say about Missouri? I don't remember.
He was and I was the co-conductor on this train. He was the driver. I believe he actually said Missouri was going to come in 8-0.
Undefeated. Okay,
I didn't quite go that far, but I thought Missouri was going to be pretty good, and no doubt Saturday's results were very disappointing. I will also say Oregon just absolutely let me down, and they probably should have won that game. That game shouldn't have been close there at the end, but Oregon just absolutely disappointed me, let me down, and sort of played into that whole narrative. Pac-12 can't really hang with those elite teams. Now, I still think Oregon's going to end up being pretty good because they did. I mean, they certainly held their own against a talented Auburn front, but you can't lose a game like that. And credit to Auburn for sort of winning it there at the end.
I think that's true. Now, I was fully on board with Missouri on Saturday because the one thing I assumed was this was going to be a really motivated team this year when their postseason is in doubt. At this point in time, I guess it's looking like they're not going to play in a bowl because of the ban. I thought they might, try to appeal this thing and take it all the way to the end. Every game has the sort of appearance of being a bowl now. You get a chance to have Kelly Bryant at quarterback. You got him from Clemson. You got a bunch of guys who didn't transfer. They wanted to stay and be a part of this program. They've got bad blood with Tennessee, for instance. There was a lot to, motivate Missouri. I thought they'd play really motivated for 12 games, and I didn't see a minute of the game against Wyoming. So I can't even really tell you what happened there. But when you can't find your own personal source of motivation in a game like that, that's a really bad sign. I was really pretty impressed with Missouri a year ago. Derek Dooley's a better offensive coordinator than I thought he was going to be. I thought Barry Odom kind of felt more of a head coach, having someone that I thought was a pretty competent offensive coordinator to come, on the heels of the Josh Heupel era, who looked like it might be a death knell when he left that program. It seemed like Missouri found some stability. They've had that entire university's been a mess for a long time, but it seemed like they found some stability last year, and I thought they'd be, chip on their shoulder angry this year. In a weird way, Missouri losing at Wyoming is almost more surprising to me, or at least as surprising as Tennessee losing to Georgia State. I thought that Missouri would be, I thought that Missouri would be really motivated there in that spot, and they just weren't.
I don't know if it's certainly a bad look.
Well, I'm obviously just being hyperbolic at that point.
I mean, you were touting Jared Garantano as the second coming of Jake Fromm.
Now, what I will say though is that for the people who now assume that Tennessee is going to be the worst team in the country, playing the worst game in the country does not make you the worst team in the country. And if you're the kind of person that likes to bet and do things like that, I think the Tennessee against BYU on Saturday is a huge play, a huge play. And as I said before, I don't know if what I saw online was a typo, if it really was true. The notion that BYU opened as a favorite only to quickly move the other direction in favor of Tennessee, but at least reflects what you think some of the public sentiment would be. Oh, that Tennessee's now proven it's the worst team in the country. Just because you play the worst game doesn't make you the worst team. And Tennessee's still going to strike fear in plenty of its opponents this year. But ultimately, I think that Pruitt got taken out of the knees by losing that game. It's the kind of thing that's going to haunt him for years to come, even if it doesn't necessarily affect him every single Saturday the rest of this season. This is the kind of thing that essentially emasculates him in terms of really being able to be the face of the Tennessee program.
And, I don't know if they lose this weekend, but there's a stretch from late September to late October where they play at Florida, home for Georgia, home for Mississippi State, at Alabama. There's a real chance they lose all 4 of those games, and I believe are 2-5 or 3-5 heading into a home game against South Carolina. And with the way South Carolina blew a game against North Carolina this past week, that could be and if Tennessee goes 0-4 against those 4 ACC teams, that could be a very, very hot seat game between Will Muschamp and Jeremy Pruitt.
And I promise we're going to talk Georgia here to close this thing out, but let me just say one more thing about South Carolina. Here's what I think that if I'm a South Carolina fan, I believe is my best recourse. I think you've got to ride this out with Muschamp. I really do. And I mean for the next couple years, maybe. I mean, the odds of Clemson being as good as it has been for the next 5 years are not that great. The odds of Georgia even being as good as it has been for the next 5 years, as much as it pains me to say this, there's at least some chance that Georgia can't maintain this for the next 5 years. You are right now, arguably your 2 biggest rivals, having the most success consecutive seasons they've had in at least a long time, if not ever. That's a miserable place to be. But if you fire Muschamp, are you going to hire another coach that could have recruited a Ryan Helinski last year, or could have recruited a Zach Pickens, or might recruit, a Tavion Feaster away from the Clemson roster? I mean, Muschamp, what should frustrate you is that South Carolina is not good on the field, but they are recruiting so far above their weight right now. They are getting players that the next Gamecocks coach would have almost no chance of getting. I know this kind of stinks. I said Florida should have done this at the time, and as it turned out, I was probably right about this. I think if you're South Carolina, you've got to ride out this Clemson dominance, Georgia dominance, and hope that one of these days when Muschamp's a much more seasoned coach, he has an opportunity to take advantage of whatever's left in their wake, especially in comparison to the unstable nature of Tennessee right now and some of these other SEC East teams that are likewise unstable. I really do think that that's probably the overall smarter play. But, man, that's a really tough sell for the people in Columbia who are perpetually impatient.
Getting back to Georgia for it?
Yeah, let me do Zinti Ziolo Allen here, who says, BA, are you now going to join us on the James Cook bandwagon? So, admittedly, Zinti, I was very, very pleasantly surprised with how Cook was used on Saturday. I thought that showed a real element of creativity from the Georgia offense to be able to see that. I guess my question would be, though, when it comes to what the bandwagon is, I mean, are we going to say that Cook gets more rushing yards this season than Zamir White? Because I'm not going to say that. I'm not. Now, how does he want to compare to Brian Harrion? Okay, I'll listen to you all on that a little bit more. I was very, very high on Harrion. Don't really change that on the basis of Saturday. But if you want to say in the combination of ways that Cook can be used as a receiver and as a running back that he might outdo Harrion's productivity, I'll listen to you on that. But I'm not going to say, even though that White was used sparingly on Saturday, I'm not backing off my idea that Zamir is one of the top 3 running backs in this team right now. But if you want to do the Harrion-Cook comparison, I'm not going to change my mind yet, but I'll certainly be willing to listen to you on that.
First of all, I don't know if it'd even be safe for you on the James Cook bandwagon, just given how much you've slept on him for.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know where Cook's going to finish in terms of, rushing yards and touches and all that. But I do think, and I think this is what was very encouraging for Saturday, was, Georgia showed that they can scheme ways for him to be a very useful and impactful player this year. They're able to get him in space and sort of and you saw, where he does have some DeAndre Swift-like qualities. That touchdown, he just left a defender there, with a dead leg and just zoomed right on by him. And I think that should be very encouraging for sort of ways Georgia can use both Cook this year and to also somewhat ease Swift's workload over the course of the season.
If you want to go and see my real-time thoughts on this, I was typing a lot in the forum.DawgNation.com on Saturday. In that first half, first quarter especially, I was really excited. Not just because Georgia had a lead, but I loved the way they were using all these offensive weapons. I want to say you had 5 different guys get carries in the first half, 5 different guys get receptions. I believe I'm right about that. 3 guys had 2 receptions in the first half. Robertson used very creatively. Cook used very creatively. I was really, really excited about that. In fact, had that continued for the entire game, I believe that would have been the happiest sort of post-game show we've done in a long time, other than, when you beat a rival like Florida. But in terms of the overall performance, we were setting ourselves up to have maybe the happiest post-game show we've had in quite some time. As it turned out, it wasn't an unhappy post-game show, but there were, what about this, what about that, things to be worried about. The overall tone for me is that a Georgia fan ought to be satisfied by what he saw on Saturday. But what you saw in the first half, that level of excitement didn't get maintained throughout the rest of the game, and Georgia was just this close in a couple of these. We've referenced the Karras thing and the Robertson long reception that got negated by the hold, but look at the way they used George Pickens. I told you all yesterday, I love the rub route they ran with him down there in the goal line that led to the pass interference on another drive. Even though they were relatively low percentage attempts, trying to go to him in the end zone a couple times the way that they did. They're trying to get these guys involved. Pickens is a part of this offense. These other guys are part of the offense. I loved the way that Georgia tried to be explosive on Saturday. And I think they are this close, to really, finding that connection. So it started out being as interested and entertained as I've been by a Georgia offense in quite some time. And it probably finished, just south of that a little bit.
Yeah. With regards to Pickens being on the field for the game, you hear Georgia talk a lot and Kirby Smart about why certain guys don't get the ball. It's, the reads and sort of how that goes. With Pickens and the 3 targets he got, all of those, he was the primary guy getting the ball. And, those last 2 weren't exactly high percentage throws. They were tough throws where Jake was going to try and have to needle it in on the sideline. But Dapper Dan asked this. I actually do think Pickens catches a touchdown pass this week. I don't know if it's from Fromm or Stetson Bennett, but I do think he's going to find his way into the end zone. And speaking of the other freshman wide receiver, Dominic Blaylock, he did not play this past week, but given the hand injury to Kearis Jackson, who's going to be out probably at least through the end of the month and to the Tennessee game, and I'll ask Kirby Smart this tonight. I'll be interested to see what sort of this means for Dominic Blaylock and how close he is to being sort of that next guy in the rotation, because Kearis Jackson actually got the start on Saturday night. He was the first guy. He was one of the first 2 wide receivers on the field.
And he started on the outside, too.
Yes, and I would also add he was the guy who returned the first punt. Now, he fielded that ball inside the 5, and then when Tyler Simmons sort of took over from there, Simmons did a great job, I thought, in terms of creating plays and creating positive yardage on those. But Blaylock, these next couple of weeks before that Notre Dame game, he's going to have a chance, I would think, to sort of show that he can do things similar to what Jackson was able to do on Saturday.
All right, let me get a few comments here, and then we're going to get off the air. Marcinio Askew says he thought the play calling Saturday was loads better than it was under Jim Chaney. Based on the stuff that I just cited, that very well could be an accurate statement. I also think this is a more talented offense than the one that Chaney had a year ago, even though he had more experience at wide receiver. And so some of the things that Coley gets to do is take advantage of a James Cook who's a year older and a Demetrius Robertson who's a year more acclimated to the Georgia system. So it's going to make his play calling look smart because I think he's got more talent to work with. Kibo Weir also asking about when Georgia unveils the Wild Dog for the first time. That's another potential role for James Cook, who I know has practiced at that a few times in the summertime. My guess is you don't do that until you need it. And when you start playing some of these SEC games or Notre Dame, at that point in time, that may be another additional wrinkle that Georgia can bring to the table. And then on a slightly different subject, Steve Schaffini brought this up, and I'm glad to be able to talk about this. Hines Ward getting hired by the Jets, I think, is a really cool thing. And I know there are a lot of, media folks around UGA who kind of behave snarkily about the fact that Georgia fans are interested in Ward being a coach for UGA because Ward himself has talked about this. But the point that I've always made is if you want to be a coach, you got to go be a coach. You don't, just because you played somewhere, get to come and get some sort of cushy job, because at the college level anyway, It's not a cushy job. It's hard work. Y'all, that's exactly what Ward is doing. Ward has got a lot of money, and yet he's been working as, I guess, almost like an intern, and now
he was an intern for the Jets last year.
Yeah, and now he's transitioned from that kind of intern role into actually being an offensive assistant. I mean, this is to me what Patrick Ewing did in the basketball world, and now he's the head coach at Georgetown. Now maybe he's not a good coach, but here a guy that made a lot of money and could have just sat on his back and just been famous ex-basketball player. He did the work to become a coach, and Ward has put his money where his mouth is to do the work to become a coach. I actually think it's really commendable that if you want to be a coach, you got to go start from ground zero and become one, because honestly, being a good player is not necessarily that much of an aid in towards being a good coach. They are very, very different jobs, and Ward has done the work here. So we'll find out, I guess, how good of a coach he's going to be. But in terms of doing it the right way towards getting a job, as opposed to having no experience and going on some media interview and saying, I want to be the head coach at blah, 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 the way some of these ex-players have embarrassed themselves by doing, I think that's a pretty commendable job by Ward, and we'll see if, I don't know, I mean, him one day being on the radar to come to Georgia, if you're going to be, if you're going to do it this way and do this hard work, it's certainly not a 0% chance, although it's still probably a pretty unlikely chance.
Yeah, my question with Hines Ward and whether or not he ends up at Georgia under Kirby Smart is the assumption is how he'd be as a recruiter in homes, because James Coley, Georgia's past wide receiver coach, clearly one of the great recruiters in the country. Worst is Hankton. We don't talk a lot about him, but he played a big role in getting George Pickens, played a big role in getting Marcus Rosemary. Those guys, are going to be good players for Georgia. And, I do wonder, and the NFL, it's just so different that you never really know until someone gets down there. But, for all the fans clamoring, hey, Hines Ward's at the Jets, he does well there, maybe we can bring him in. There was another former Georgia coach who was a one-time prominent Jets assistant coach who came in at the college level, and it was more or less one of the most disastrous seasons in recent Georgia
you're talking
history.
about Schottenheimer. And I totally get that. I mean, I'm assuming that Ward will never be a coach at Georgia, but when this topic has come up before, Ward wasn't even a coach. He's a coach now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I believe being a position coach at the college level is probably more difficult than it is at the NFL level because of the way that recruiting impacts that, and I think that Georgia's got itself a good one in Cortez Hankton. But it is interesting how this conversation has evolved. Ward now is at least a real coach. By the way, we're going to get off the air here, but our buddy Dennis Wilson is back at it, saying that Miami's going to walk it down. Mac Brown's antics on Saturday must mean the Hurricanes are getting going with the Tar Heels. So Dennis Wilson has been heard from again. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to allow this or not, given the fact that Dennis couldn't get the win for Florida the other day.
I would love it to see Mac Brown and North Carolina beat Miami. Ooh, that'd be fun.
2-0 Mac Brown. I'm not quite sure I know how to live in that world. Thomas Van Santa says, I hope A&M beats Clemson. Are they good enough to keep it close? In a perfect scenario, they probably are. Are they good enough to go in this spot and win this game, knowing that Clemson, I mean, the advantage of an easy schedule is you can circle a couple of them. And, Clemson gets to circle this one in a way that really A&M doesn't. So keep it close, keep it entertaining. I'd love nothing more than to be watching this game more than I'm watching Georgia Murray State in the early stages. But somehow something tells me that's going to be wishful thinking. That's going to end up being wishful thinking. Anybody else have anything else? Texas LSU I'm really excited about, though. Really excited about that game.
So, because that's certainly going to be one of the games we picked for this weekend, and you've talked a lot about Tom Herman's record as an underdog. Just putting it out there, I know LSU's the better team. I think LSU should win this game, but I'm thinking long and hard about picking Texas in the points. I believe the game's up to 5 right now.
Okay.
That number and Tom Herman's record as an underdog, I believe it's like 13-2-1 against the spread, 10 outright wins. That number's looking mighty interesting.
It's going to be a great game. I mean, listen, I would love to tell you that the game I'm most excited about this Saturday is Georgia Murray State. That's probably not true. I am looking forward to the Dooley ceremony. The game itself is a little bit more like G-Day 2, but LSU Texas, I am pretty excited about that. Appreciate all of you being here. Thanks so much. Good to have you as a part of our RS Andrews Cool Down. I'll also invite you to check out AJC.com to get your Atlanta news now each and every day. You know, there's still more aftermath from Hurricane Dorian going on. I know there's even some impact coming to some of the games here this weekend. Charleston Southern, for instance, is going to play South Carolina on Saturday. That entire university is not having school right now. So I don't know how it's impacted their practice schedule. I know the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't practice yesterday. So we definitely have an instance where the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian continues. And so obviously the AJC is watching for how this impacts Atlanta there as well. And I mentioned the Dooley ceremony. There's also some really good stuff at the AJC this week looking at the career of Vince Dooley and leading up what's going to happen on Saturday when Sanford Stadium becomes Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium. I'm really excited about that. R.S. Andrews brings the R.S. Andrews Cool Down to you. Check us out coming up on Friday for our R.S. Andrews Go with the Flow. It's our gambling show. We kind of give our thoughts on the upcoming point spreads for the weekend. That's a fun one to do. We had great feedback on that last week with our buddy Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews, so y'all check that out. And I'm going to see you back here tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. for another episode of DawgNation Daily, presented by Deemer Box. Y'all have a great day. We'll look forward to talking to you then.